welcome to the series on the Frontline speaker series. This is the 9th in a row of the series, and we are organizing this through the City Resilience Program of the World Bank and the Resilient Cities Network. And today the topic is a roadmap to resilience, cities planning and adapting to climate change. Let me give you, my name is Barjur Mehta, I work for the World Bank. And let me give you the ground rules. So the purpose of these seminars is to have an open and honest learning conversation. Calls are not on the record, and we ask that you do not attribute any comments unless you have the person's express permission to do so. We can help you obtain this permission if you need it. Today we have 375 registered participants, and to facilitate the discussion, we ask that you write your questions with the help of the Q&A function of WebEx. And please note that the recording of this session, as the presentations, will be posted online by next week. So thank you very much. And Lauren, on.
So much, Barjur, for the introduction, and it's great to be here with all of you. I'm Lauren Sorkin, the Executive Director of the Resilient Cities Network, and today we're going to be speaking about roadmaps to resilience and how cities are planning and adapting to climate change. Just in the last few months, we've seen amazing heat waves all over South Asia, here in Europe as well, and floods hitting Australia and many other areas. So it's clear that no matter what we are doing in terms of climate change mitigation today, there are many impacts of climate change and many of those intersecting impacts of climate change that we'll have to deal with no matter what. And we know that cities are on the front lines of that action. We'll be hearing more from that from our speakers today, so I'll keep that introduction very brief so that we can jump into the discussion. I will introduce 3 speakers that we will have with us today. It's really my pleasure to introduce Elisabeth Gruber, who's the Director of the Department for International Financial Institutions at the Austrian Federal Ministry of Finance. And Dr. Gruber is there at the Ministry of Finance before she was a senior advisor responsible for the World Bank Group portfolio, working with multilateral development finance. And previous to that was the alternate executive director at the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C. She graduated with a degree in business administration and holds a doctorate in development economics from Vienna University. We're so glad to have you with us, Dr. Gruber, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. Next, we'll have 2 city panelists who are going to bring us practice from their diverse cities. We're going to have James Kwame Mensah, who is a senior lecturer at the Department of Public Administration and Health Services at the University of Ghana Business School. And he was formerly the Chief Resilience Officer in the city of Accra. In his previous career, he was serving on the Metropolitan Accra Government Assembly, and he played roles in terms of economic development, as well as a major role in the development of Accra's resilience strategy. And we were glad to work with you on that, James. His research publications, you can find them in many journals, and you will see that he's also worked with UNDP, Dalbert Group, and Share Powered Ventures. We will also hear today from a city panelist coming to us from Vienna. So Johannes Luther is the head of Department for Urban Mobility and Urban Innovation. And he's a researcher and a political consultant in the field of urban development. He's been doing that since 1999, designing, managing, and moderating different dialogues on urban process. He was for many years the deputy CEO at Europa Forum, Vine, and the Center for Urban Dialogue for European Policy based in Vienna, and the CEO of a multilateral called the Centrope Agency. Dr. Litter studied political science at the University of Vienna and the Vienna Institute of Advanced Studies. Again, welcome to all of our speakers. So now, without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dr. Elisabeth Gruber, who will speak to us about cities adapting and planning for climate change.
Thank you, Lauren, for your kind words. I also will do some introductory remarks because I'm not a complete expert, and because I'm not a complete expert on this topic, we invited actually an expert from the Austrian administration, and I'm very happy that we'll be kind of co-hosting and co-organizing this event also with the city of Vienna. So it's my pleasure to warmly welcome you today to this Cities on the Frontline event or webinar on behalf of the Austrian Ministry of Finance. Let me also thank the World Bank in particular and the City Resilience Program and also the whole network actually for organizing this webinar, and understand this is a series of webinars already. And we're very pleased now that we take an active role in this webinar series, actually for the first time this time. It's also known, it's a known fact actually, that more and more people, so to say, live in cities. So studies suggest that by 2050, 70% of the world's population will live in cities. At the same time, cities are very exposed to climate change, and the anticipated increase in natural disaster is also something that we all have to cope with. This is a small background actually to explain a little bit this topic of today's webinar is very timely, and also that it's a topic that the Ministry of Finance, we are very, very interested at. So the topic, a roadmap to resilience, city planning for climate change, is of course a very particular important one. In fact, the topic of urban development and resilience has been a long-standing key priority for us in the Austrian Ministry of Finance. Our ministry cooperates with various international institutions on that topic, and among others, of course, also with the World Bank, but also with regional development banks and other funds that cooperate and try to contribute to global economic development. In that context of this cooperation, we have defined a set of 4 thematic priorities where we see a particular need, so to say. So today's webinar touches upon 2 of these priority areas, which are urban development and climate change, and of course a combination of these 2 very important topics. So a part of these priorities, we have been supporting the City Resilience Program by the World Bank, which is co-organizing today's webinar and for quite some time already. So the particular value added we see in the City Resilience Program is its unique capacity, so to say, to support cities in planning for resilience and mobilization capital for a resilient future, while building also, and this is very important for us, partnerships. We're also proud to mention that the City Resilience Program has engaged with more than 140 cities in 55 countries since its inception in 2017. As one of these activities, the program provides cities with analytical tools to analyze and plan for their resilience, like the so-called city scan. Another activity is the organization, of course, of workshops, which directly link cities with finance to implement a resilient agenda. And yet another activity is the contribution to global knowledge exchange on urban resilience, like today's webinar. I personally look very much forward today to this exchange on resilience, building strategies, and the implementation by cities. It is, in my view, exciting to have with us also an expert, and some expert actually, who will share the experiences with the city of Vienna, and who will provide us insight also on the city of Accra, on their approaches to planning and adapting to climate change. So I think this is an extremely valuable exchange of actually 2 cities, 2 city experts coming from 2 different environments. So I'm sure we will learn a lot and hear a lot today, and learn a lot, and hopefully also exchange a lot today. Just let me finish by 2 small remarks on publicity on Vienna, so to say. Vienna just has won the title of the most livable cities recently again, so to say. And however, given the heat waves, which we have just started in June this year, and energy prices that are at a record high, there still needs to also to be done a lot in Vienna actually to adapt to these challenges of climate change. This being said, I'm very pleased to hand over to the 2 expert panelists who share their experience. And again, I'd like to thank you and the organizers organizing today's session. So thank you very much, and I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Elisabeth. It's really a pleasure to welcome you to Cities on the Frontline. Again, thank you for being here and for sharing with our community that's now been gathering for more than 2 years together. We are very, very excited to welcome, as you mentioned, the world's most livable city, apparently, that has just been awarded, Vienna, to share with us some of their experiences and how you are adapting and planning for climate change. So Johannes, I'm going to turn the screen and the microphone over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me today, for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be with you today and to share works out. There we go. First, I have to say that other than Accra, and we had a talk already with James, a short one yesterday, Vienna is not having a resilience strategy of its own. But in view of recent developments, the question of resilience for urban systems is, of course, very high on the agenda of Viennese politics and administration. And we try to integrate the questions of resilience in all strategies and all action plans that we have in Vienna. And I will try to explain how we do that. In order to start with the obvious, of course, crisis has become something like a permanent condition in recent years. And I've just started yesterday to list a few crises that have a global impact of the 21st century, starting with 9/11 and the worldwide financial economic crisis of the years 2008, 2009, and the following years. Today, we're coping with the Corona crisis, the pandemic. We have some large crises that are in particular affecting Europe, like the Euro crisis, the migration crisis of the years 2015 and following, the Brexit, with UK leaving the European Union, and of course, and perhaps above all, the imminent climate crisis, which means that there is we have to cope with conditions of volatility, where it's quite difficult to foresee all aspects of development today, and have to prepare for the unforeseen. This is just a very short notice about what we believe, what virtues or capacities cities need to have to do that, to prepare for the unforeseen as far as this is possible, and cope with shocks and stresses, short-term shocks, as well as long-term stresses that put pressure on urban systems. On the one hand, of course, you need robustness, and this is particularly true for urban infrastructures. The way you invest in those infrastructures helps you to prepare in order to not to be negatively affected or only barely be negatively affected by shocks and stresses. At the same time, you need learning aptitudes and adaptability. This means monitoring your own processes, recognizing where the shortcomings are, drawing your conclusions and reshaping your processes and systems, and being able to react with the existing resources in order to minimize harm. At the same time, of course, there is the necessity to adapt through innovation. So all cities need to invest in innovativeness, in research, and there we go. And finally, to still keep control and keep capacity to act and make decisions even under those volatile conditions. Now, what we did in Vienna only recently is a very small survey about the question of what challenges lie ahead of us. And this is a survey where you can, on the one hand, see those challenges that are seen as most likely. This is the one axis where it reads Eintrittswahrscheinlichkeit. I'm sorry that I could not translate that in this chart. And the other question was, and which of those most likely threats would have the most severe impacts on urban systems? And this is, of course, a survey among Viennese experts. You can see that on the left-hand corner, there are the one challenges that are not seen as most severe, which are in Vienna, for example, strikes and revolts. And those grouping in the upper corner on the right-hand side are those that where we see the most dangers for the future. And you can see it's climate change. It's all questions of environmental stress on systems, combined with social crisis, with the economic crisis, with unemployment, with inequality. And we believe that there is a strong interdependence between those ecological and economic aspects. When we speak about the environmental stresses, what is most important for Vienna, of course, is heat. Vienna is becoming a city where we have strong problems with growing problems with urban heat island effects. And in particular, this is a problem for the vulnerable groups. So for the most young and old one, for the homeless, and for the sick. Just have to stop sharing my screen because my presentation obviously has been kind of locked, and I'm trying to do that again. So here we go again, and I hope you can see that. And what you can see is again, this is not surprising. This is temperatures rising in Vienna. On the left-hand side, you can see the long-term, the deviation from long-term average temperatures. And it's a graphic that you can that doesn't need much explanation. On the right-hand side, you can see scenarios for the future, where you can see that even to the year 2100, temperatures will rise even more. This is the number of days with a minimum temperature of 20 degrees. So this puts, of course, stress on the city. So what we did in Vienna is try to find a double solution on this severe situation. And one part of this is our long-term response is our smart city strategy, which is a strategy for the horizon of 2040, where we have developed goals. The most important one is the goal of climate neutrality by 2040. But we have developed goals for all areas of climate mitigation and climate adaptation. And secondly, we have set up a roadmap, which is kind of our path to climate neutrality and our path to climate sensitivity, where we have defined the most important measures and instruments and activities to be set. And we try to implement this and to achieve this by innovation in governance tools, which is, for example, our new climate budget, and by measures. And the approach is that we at the same time try to reduce the effects of urban systems on climate change by reducing CO2 emissions in all areas, the heating and cooling system and the mobility system being the most important ones, and at the same time try to set our goals in all questions of climate adaptation. Speaking of climate adaptation, you can see here, and I hope you still can, the goals that we are setting in the smart city strategy. And this starts with the question of how to protect the vulnerable groups, as I already put it. and how to then reshape our the green spaces in the city, the open spaces and public spaces in the city, how to design our buildings and our urban development areas in a way that they are influencing climate change, not in a negatively, but wherever possible, even in a positive way, how to deal with rainwater management and so on. In the climate roadmap, this is translated into concrete measures. And again, we start here with health and well-being, with measures that are on a long-term basis, trying to protect the population. And then we go step by step with the big ecosystems, natural environments, and questions of development and planning of green spaces, of public space, and finally by providing investment in infrastructures and services of general needs that are important. So this is the long-term approach. The other one is the short-term response on the threats lying ahead, and this is the so-called Vienna Heat Action Plan. On the left-hand side, you can see a map that is trying to combine the climatic effects of the climate crisis, so where's Vienna becoming more and more hot, with social aspects like low-income groups, people that are most vulnerable, people that can't leave their home because of certain disabilities and other questions. And in the climate action plan, there is again, we're combining the planning for the preparation of the summer with concrete protection actions during the summer, and then special measures during the heat waves. And for each of those measures, we are defining not only who's the target group and what are the concrete actions, but who is in charge, who's responsible for each action. Do we have the budget available? Do we have the capacities available? And what is most important, every year after the summer, all those measures are evaluated again, and we try to check what has worked out, where did we find difficulties, where do we have measures that need to be optimized, and so on. And another important aspect of this climate action, this heat action plan, is the focus on processes. What you can see on the right-hand side is a scheme of what we call the communication cascade, which starts with the weather services that have to inform certain communicators, certain multiplicators of developing heat waves as soon as they are detected. And then we have those multiplicators in this upper row that are informing the health sector, the childcare sector, the nursery sector. And within these sectors, there is the information flow goes on, and all those single institutions like schools, like kindergartens, like nursery homes or hospitals, then might take their own measures for protecting their people, so be it the kids or the sick, and so on. And by combining these rather long-term measures with those short-term protection processes, we hoped that to reach a certain degree of resilience. Of course, both is quite new. The action, the smart city strategy has just been adopted by Vienna City Council. The climate roadmap has just been adopted, and this action plan that I'm showing is the most recent one. We will see after this summer how things are developing. We try to establish an evaluation and monitoring process for all of these instruments so that we can develop this as a learning tool and optimize it after each of those evaluations steps. So that's it for a moment. I have to apologize that I had some troubles with the presentation. I still hope that you could see most of my slides, and I'm looking forward to the debate afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johannes. I think you gave the participants a lot to think about with both the long-term planning and the priorities in terms of short-term communication and activating communities. There will be a lot of time for discussion coming up after James's presentation. But for now, I want to say thank you, and we're going to turn the floor over to James to hear about what's happening in a very different city on a very different scale. James, there's probably many similarities in terms of how you have been framing adaptation in Accra, but perhaps how you activate climate resilience could be different. So over to you, James. Looking forward to hearing from you now.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Johannes, for your presentation. Very insightful one. I want to say I'm very happy to be part of this program and to give a presentation about the Accra Resilience Strategy. I want to start by saying that the urban population is growing, right? So if you look at the trend of the population growth worldwide, Africa, and even within Ghana and Accra in particular, if we take Accra, we could see that at the eve of independence, the population of Accra was around 190,000. Fast forward to 2019, population has hit 2.7 million, and it is estimated that by 2050, the population of Accra will grow up to 10.5 million. This population growth actually comes with opportunities and challenges as well. So cities are urbanizing with a lot of people, and these people comes with a lot of opportunities. Our city present a lot of opportunities. However, there are also challenges. Therefore, it depends on how the city is able to leverage on this population for it to give it a positive, profile. So, in terms of Accra, we have noticed certain kind of shocks, certain kind of stresses. As far back as 1939, Accra experienced an earthquake. And then there are other shocks and other stresses that has happened along the line, but these are the major ones that I want to highlight. So, in 1999, we experienced an earthquake in Accra. Fast forward to June 3rd. June 3rd is popular in Ghana. June 3rd is popular in Ghana because of the twin problem that happened. June 3rd, 2015, because of the twin problem that happened. Because there was a heavy rainfall, and that resulted in a fire outbreak in a fuel station, killing thousands of people on that day. And this day is never forgotten in the history of Ghana. Then in November 2012, there was also a building collapse. On that day, when I heard it on the news, I had to rush home immediately because my sister attends school around this area. And these school children often come to, it's a shopping mall, Malcolm, it's a shopping mall that collapsed. And these school children often come there during lunchtime. They come there to buy some toffees and some snacks. So I was actually afraid and was so stressed that my sister could be part of the people who were trapped under this building. So we could realize that in all these shocks, challenges, stresses, the approach to managing them has been reactive. They happen, and then we have to find a way of managing them. So the city thought it wise that no, this is not enough. We need to be proactive in how we respond to some of these challenges of the city. Therefore, the city actually applied to join the Resilient Cities program. So in December 2014, Accra was officially, officially asked or joined the City Resilience program. Then in April 2015, there was a workshop to set the agenda as to how we could partner and come out with a strategy that is going to deal with, helping to deal with the shocks and stresses and the challenges of the city. So 2016, there was a bit of a change of power in Ghana. And if you know how our political system works, the president eventually chooses most of the people who lead. So that means that after the 2016 elections and the change of power, then the president has to nominate a new person. So in March 2017, a new mayor was appointed to office. Then between this 2016 to 2017, there was a lot of engagement with actors, with stakeholders of the city, so that we could actually begin the process of coming out with a resilience strategy. Then between February to December 2018, the phase 2 commences, which was actually about the design, the partnership, and the various strategies that could help us to be able to mitigate the challenges, the stresses, and the shocks in the city. So in March 2018, the city actually released a preliminary assessment report of the challenges of the city. Then fast forward to March 2019, the resilience strategy was outdoored. Okay, so I want to take us through the development phase, the process. And here I want to stress more on stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement is very, very important in the development of a resilience strategy, especially if you take the context of Ghana, where there are several stakeholders with various powers. So if these people are not actually involved in the development of this strategy, its implementation becomes very difficult. So there was serious attempt to engage all stakeholders, including civil society organizations, including development partners, public institutions, private institutions, and the ordinary citizen, the vulnerable citizen who are affected on daily basis with these shocks and stresses in the city. So this engagement, close to 2,500 people, over 2,000 people were engaged to be able to solicit their views of the city. And this led to the identification of the shocks and stresses in Accra. Then also we try to pick perceptions and expectations of all these stakeholders. And this led to the development of the preliminary assessment strategy. And this therefore led to the discovery areas. So some areas we discovered, some new areas that were not even thought of were discovered in this process. And this led to the prioritization, because there are a number of initiatives, a number of actions that we thought could help, but we need to prioritize and get ones and those that have long-term effect and on the resilience of the city. So engagement, collaboration is very, very important in the development of a city strategy. In the resilience strategy, we identify the top shocks, and the top shocks in Accra are flooding, infrastructure and building collapse, which I have illustrated, that there was and consistently we keep getting news of building collapse. So this was very, very important that is included in the resilience strategy. And then issues of disease outbreak, especially during the rainy season. So this is a rainy season in Ghana. So we experience a lot of disease outbreak in the city. And of course, fires. Most of the buildings, most of the dwellings are informal in nature and crowded. Our markets are crowded, so we often have issues of fire outbreak. Then lastly, earthquake. Earthquake has, apart from the 1939 earthquake, we never experienced any, but there are signs of earthquake, and earthquake zones have actually been earmarked in Ghana here. I think about 3 years ago, we had a bit of a tremor where There was some breakages in the landscape, but we have not actually experienced it in recent time. But we know that this is a shock that could happen and then cause a lot of shocks to the city and or cause high cost to the city. Then there were other stresses of the city, such as high cost of living. It is very, very expensive to live in the city of Accra compared to the cost of goods and services compared to how much people earn on daily basis is very, very high. Then we talk of issues of poor waste management. Waste has been a very big issue, management of waste, and therefore the city of Accra is engulfed with a lot of waste, and this is what is leading to this issue of flooding as well. The waste, the plastic in the city is so overwhelming to the extent that we actually need to ensure we address this challenge in Accra. Then issues of insufficient transportation. If you actually know Accra well, we don't our public bus or transportation system is not all that resilient. We have the metro mass, and then along the line we had the rapid bus system, which is eventually collapsed. So issues of transportation has been very stressful to the people of Accra. And then the issue of poor sanitation leading to water scarcity. We are often stressed with the issue of water. Less than 20% of the city of Accra is covered with treated water from the Ghana Water Company. So most people actually buy water from water vendors. Some people had to sink a borehole. Others had to harvest rain. Others take water from some sources that are actually infected with diseases. So we identify this as the top shocks and the top stresses of the city. So the vision of the resilience strategy was to make Accra a smart, sustainable, and resilient city that anticipate and plan for unexpected shocks, stresses, rather than reacts to them. So we want to shift from, reacting to these things when they happen to rather anticipating, being proactive, anticipate and plan for them. Right, so the resilient city, the Accra resilient city actually identified 5 main pillars. And these pillars emanate from the shocks and the stresses. The first pillar is urban mobility and transportation. The second pillar had to do with creating an environmentally sustainable city. The third pillar is about citizen engagement and accountability. Then the fourth pillar is about management of flood, waste, and sanitation. And then the fifth pillar has to do with the informal sector. Accra is dominated by the informal sector, and close to 80% or more earn a living from the informal sector, which means that we need to pay attention to this sector because that is the anchor of the city. Right. Moving forward, we realize that collaboration is very, very important in city resilience and in management of a city. Therefore, we laid a very strong emphasis on collaboration. Collaboration, we try to collaborate with NGOs, civil society organizations, international development partners, public agencies, private agencies, all of them. We also realize that resilience issues do not have a boundary. For instance, in Accra, we had the Odo River, which often is the cause of most of our flooding because the Odo River always overflow and spread and causes flooding. But the source of this Odo River is actually from a different region. It has its source all the way from the eastern region of Ghana. And therefore, if you don't collaborate, because when it rains there, it may not rain in Accra, it will rain in the eastern region, and we will have the effect in Accra. So this means that we need to collaborate with such people. And I'm happy there's a project funded by the World Bank, the GARED project, that is the Greater Accra Resilient and Integrated Development Project. $200 million from the World Bank to be able to deal with this Odo Basin issue. So the aim of this project is to ensure that there's an improved flood risk. It's also to ensure that there's proper waste management in the city and some infrastructure upgrade, such as drainage systems, right? So the aim of this project is actually to ensure that some reservoirs are created along the Odo Basin so that in peak seasons, peak rainy seasons like June, July, August, water can be actually stored in the reservoirs so that in the dry season, the water is released so that the city doesn't get flooded. So I would like to end my presentation here and wait for the questions that will follow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Johannes, as well. So, these are wonderful presentations. So let me start the question and answer session by posing a question to James. That you mentioned that in the Ghanaian system, when there is an election and there is another party that comes to power, there is a change in administration. So, and this happens across many of our people who are participating in this go through the same situation. So how do you ensure that a plan that was made under one administration continues to be followed so that because you can't just go back to the drawing board? Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Bajo. Thank you so much. So we realize this, and this is one of the challenges of this country, Ghana. A change in administration and abandon on a non-continuation of project that is started by a previous government. This is one of the biggest challenge. And if you come to Ghana today, you will see thousands of infrastructure stuck in the bush, stuck in the villages with non-continuation. So we realized this. And as expert, what we did was to tie this resilience strategy to the medium-term development strategy of the city, right? So every 4 years, the city is supposed to come out with a medium-term development strategy that will be used for the management of the city for 4 years. So what we did was to align the resilience strategy to the medium-term development strategy so that its implementation will be smooth. And then the other thing is that we also ensure that the administrators, the workers in the city, these are not political appointees. The head is the political appointee, but the others are not political appointees. So they were fully involved in the process so that they can ensure continuity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, James. Laura?
Thanks, Bajor, and thanks, James, for that answer. I actually wanted to ask a similar, but perhaps more specific question to this time that we're living in right now, both to Johannes and to Elisabeth. We're experiencing unprecedented stresses in Europe due to conflict that has effect on energy supply and food supply. How do you think that has impacted the political will to invest in climate change, adaptation, and resilience? And do you think that will really increase the investment in this work in the future?
Thank you. Elisabeth, do you want to start or should I give a go?
Maybe you start and I have to think a little bit about it.
I'll start with a remark following up to James, because what you said, James, is exactly what I would have answered to the question of how to ensure that there is continuity in implementation, even with changing governments. It's the same in Vienna, although the conditions are different, that we try to align every strategy, every program that we have to our smart city strategy, which is our sustainability and climate strategy, so that be it the tourism strategy or the strategy for the urban development plan, or the economic strategy, all are aligned with the smart city and sustainable strategy. And we hope that by involving as many stakeholders as possible that are in the administration and in the public institutions and even in companies, we try to create a momentum which is kept high even in terms of different government constellations. The other question is what you were just asking, Lauren, about the question of energy supply right now. I would hope that we can combine those two strategies that are currently followed. The one is providing security of energy provision by getting what you can in terms of energy provision on a short term, and still creating the awareness that on a long-term basis, it's absolutely necessary to create a large share of independence by investing in renewable energies. And in Austria, we have the good situation that when it comes to electricity, we have a very high share of renewable energy in the electricity provision, but the difficulties lie in heating and cooling, where we are mostly dependent, in particular in Vienna, from Russian gas, and try to also here keep the momentum of investing in renewable, in solar energy, in geothermal energy, in order, on the one hand, to reach our climate goals, and on the other hand, to reduce the dependency from imported energy.
Maybe very briefly, if I may complement from the Minister of Finance perspective, which is always concentrating on the financial aspects, so to say, and on the budgetary implications. We live currently in a very difficult situation because we, of course, did not anticipate half a year ago that we will have a multi-crisis environment and that we will face high inflation and unexpected high inflation in Europe, and all this combined with very high energy costs. And so currently, these are huge challenges where we need to adapt, and we need actually to think in the short-term implication and adaptation measures, and then also medium-term and long-term adaptation and mitigation measures. So I do not foresee for the medium and long-term some huge negative impacts on our adaptation goals and our goals to achieve a sustainable path in our energy provisions. But in the short term, of course, we need to adapt. Austria is highly also dependent on the imports of Russian gas. And of course, we need to think very quickly in alternatives. So this has a kind of a positive and a negative side on it. The very positive side is that this is increasing the push actually to change our energy mix to a more sustainable and hopefully also greener energy mix. But on the other hand, we need to think also in shorter term measures. And unfortunately, our Minister of Ecology and Climate, she just needed to announce actually that we need to rethink of using also gas and even oil, maybe to some short-term consumption needs, to fulfill actually some needs that in particular our industry has. So these, of course, are the downsides. But I believe that on a medium term and the long term, we all think that we need to keep on track in becoming sustainable and leading to zero emissions at some point.
I wanted to follow up with a question, perhaps, about sharing practices that are happening on the ground. we talk a lot about strategies and the priorities within those strategies and the importance of communicating risk and vulnerability and empowering communities to respond to that. Could you give us an example, James in Accra and Johannes in Vienna, of a specific kind of resilience building project that's strengthening the ability of the communities in your cities to respond to climate impacts that you think could be helpful for those listening in today to perhaps think about adapting and creating a similar kind of project in their cities?
Because you mentioned the aspect of sharing, and I believe sharing also in terms of the sharing economy is one of those approaches that we are following, and which is both providing top-down possibilities of sharing, as well as supporting bottom-up initiatives of sharing. And this starts from mobility aspects. We are now experimenting not only with car sharing and bike sharing instruments, but also with ride sharing, like carpooling, which is quite an old concept, but a new one when it comes to modern urban transport. At least in Vienna, we are again in a pilot stage in experimenting with the question of how can we better share mobility issues. And of course, the aspect of sharing is also something that is very much resource saving and protecting in many other fields. For example, when it comes to spaces, co-working spaces, joint kitchens and community areas in living in housing estates. We have by far not reached the ceiling when it comes to thinking of how can we protect our resources, how can we reduce our energy consumption by sharing the resources that we have in a proper and smart way. And yes, there are a lot of pilot actions and experiments running, and I hope that those will be successful.
Thank you. So in the case of Ghana, we started with green spaces. So public spaces, abandoned spaces. We started with greening those spaces to mitigate the impact of climate change. And then we also embarked on the support to waste, informal waste workers. Informal waste workers. And when I say informal waste workers, we have former companies that actually manage waste. But along the line, what happened was that there were a lot of waste in informal settlements, or places people may call slums, that these former waste companies with big trucks cannot access, therefore causing a lot of flooding and a lot of waste management problems. So we started by bringing these people to the table, informal waste collectors, and registering them. They use these tricycles. They can navigate and go through all the informal settlements to bring out this waste. The important thing about this is that it did not only create jobs for most people who migrate from the northern part of the country to the cities to come and look for non-existing jobs, but it also helped to deal with the issues of flooding, issues of the disease, and issues of, outbreak of diseases and waste management problems. So these are a few that we try to pilot, and I'm happy to announce that the waste management project actually won Bloomberg Award in the US for being one of the innovative projects that has been implemented to have a twin effect of not only providing jobs, but also mitigating the effect of climate change and flooding in the city of Accra. Thank you.
Hi, Lauren. Can I pose one question that's very interesting that comes from the participants, and it's to both of you. Is that in terms of the government budget, in terms of prioritizing the government budget for resilience actions, are there any glaring trade-offs with development projects that have been that were delayed or stopped? So, you know, the balance between where do you spend your money on a development project or on a resilience project, and that trade-off. So some examples from there, please. Johannes?
I'll start with the general answer, which is what we're trying to implement in Vienna is what we call a climate budget. So in each of the yearly budgets of the city of Vienna, all those measures have to be highlighted that have a positive climate impact by reducing CO2 emissions, by reducing material consumption or whatever. And we have a new unit right below the CEO of the city administration that has to then to check whether the sum of all those measures is enough, is sufficient to reach our climate goals. So that means that our climate goals and our climate action programs are somehow translated into the city budget, which I believe is important in order to really get them on the ground. The other thing, because you mentioned that, is of course what we are witnessing in Vienna today is that there are a lot of projects that are now reassessed in terms of what is the also negative climate impact. And we have large road programs, for example, in Vienna, that have closing the major road ring around the city in order to reduce the transit traffic in the city, which are now reassessed and stopped because there is a strong feeling that the way those roads are built would cause more CO2 emissions that are absolutely necessary. And we're currently in the midst of these discussions whether those roads are not being built or built in a completely different form, ensuring the accessibility of new urban districts that are built on the one hand, but on the other hand, reducing the environmental impact of those infrastructure buildings. And this is something which is, of course, a most political question where we have also a lot of conflicts about that, but a discussion that is necessary to be led in our times.
Thank you. I just want to add to what Johannes has just said. It is pretty forward in Ghana in terms of budgeting. So what is not budgeted for, you cannot take that action. So the good thing is that you need to align your climate strategy, you need to align your resilience strategy to the medium-term development plan. So every city is given the opportunity, what we call the metropolitan municipal assemblies in Ghana, they are given the opportunity to come out with their own medium-term development plan, their priorities. So therefore, you ensure that your priorities are in line with the resilience strategy. So funding becomes so easy. If it is not tied to it, funding becomes very difficult. So if you look at the Accra resilience strategy, you notice that it is still being implemented. So in the involvement of all the stakeholders, especially the public servants who are actually permanent employees until they retire in the local government, or I mean the city, these people were involved in the process. So they are fully aware of the resilience strategy and they utilize it. So any cycle of the medium-term development plan, they try to ensure that all the activities in the medium-term development, in the resilience strategy, are mainstreamed into the medium-term development plan so that funding becomes easy. So that is how we actually try to ensure that there's no constraint on their budget. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I think we might have to end it there. We are at the top of the hour. I want to say that the examples and the knowledge that you both shared has been really meaningful, and I'm sure that we could actually go on for quite a bit longer on this topic because there's so much complexity in terms of adapting a city as a system to the different challenges that come from climate change, that I hope we can continue this conversation. If there are questions that haven't been answered during this session, we will share them with you as our panelists, and we hope that we can share back your answers with those in the cities on the frontline community. But for now, I really want to thank everyone for coming, for voting with their sign-ins today to be on the Cities on the Frontline series and to listen to Elisabeth, to James, to Johannes, and to hopefully learn more so that you can help your cities and communities better prepare for the impacts of climate change. And on behalf of both the World Bank and Resilient Cities Network, again, thank you for being here, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next Cities on the Frontline.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.